Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. We were at the Circuit of the Americas this weekend, and it was chaos and carnage, but sensational racing for some of the races, a bit of madness for others. But before we get into the weekend, we're going to talk about VR46 because they were running a custom livery this weekend. Photos will be on screen as always. It's darker, it's got a tinge of retro vibes to me. Personally, I really enjoy their current livery because it's vibrant and bright. But what did the two of you think about the custom VR46 livery?
I really preferred the custom livery. I mean, I know I was very dramatic about my feelings about the original livery, and I still have them. I don't like the color scheme. I love a bright livery. I do. I love colors on a bike, but that color scheme does not work. It's too bright. It feels like a high vis. Like it's just ugly. And yeah, I feel like the custom livery they had this weekend was really cute, actually. I'd like to see that as a full-time livery.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I kind of preferred the regular one, but as normal with these sorts of liveries, as soon as they're on track, I think they look just so much better. Same thing happened with the Trackhouse livery, which they used this weekend, which was the one that they revealed. I thought that one was pretty good on track as well. I was actually considering buying one of the one-off shirts that they did for the riders. I was gonna buy a Morbidelli one because I like Morbidelli, but VR46 store and their ridiculous international shipping prevented that. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid one-off livery.
I do have to admit that the race suits, which did match the livery, I much preferred those over the regular ones as well. But yeah, we'll just have differing opinions. And apologies for Lewis's tip taps in the background, because I know that'll come through on the recording. But let's look at the Moto 3 race. Because straight off the bat for me, I was irritated. Because if you're a long time listener of this podcast, you know I am passionate about Moto 3 and Moto 2 having warm up. It helps the riders get up to speed and it acclimatizes them, but it also helps the teams and riders set the bike up. So, what we saw this weekend was straight off the bat, Adrian Fernandez couldn't get his bike to start. This was hugely irritating to me because he started the season super well. We did, yeah, it just frustrates me. I'll leave it there because otherwise I'll ramble about this for ages. For the race itself, we do want to shout out Keyless. This is his first Moto3 race and he qualified in second place. He managed to translate that to a fifth place, and that's just a really, really good result for him as a rookie. The podium was Pirelli, João Kelso, and Jose Antonio Rueda for the top spot, who won in a dominating fashion. What are your guys' thoughts on the race? And
I always love a bit of drama in a Moto3 race. Like, I'm not going to stay here and say that I prefer a boring race with no crashes, but like, it was too dangerous. I think personally, like, I understand motorsport is dangerous. You know, they should prepare for the dangers, but it hits a point that it's just far too dangerous to even attempt to race, and that I feel is what the Moto3 was like. Um, in just a few laps, we had rider after rider going down. Like every second lap, there was a yellow flag, and I think that says a lot about the conditions. Um, yeah, shout out to Keeles, with his fifth place. That was honestly amazing. Rueda ran a solid race. He was consistently near the front. That's great. Bit upset about Ogden. I'll always be upset about Ogden, but I can't really blame any of the riders given that condition. And yeah, honestly, even just a howler for David Munoz. I know what some people think about him. Like, I like the guy, and I don't think he deserved whatever that Grand Prix was. So I'm hoping he gets a better one. I'm hoping his next race is better. And big shout out to Cormac Buchanan for his first top 10.
Yeah, I was really happy that Rueda managed to sort of get his own personal revenge for what happened last year when he qualified on the front row and then had the appendicitis. So I'm glad that he managed to get the win this year. I feel like he would have been in contention last year. Aside from that, the only thing that I want to personally mention is the fact that Jacob Ralston managed to get 2 points on his return to Moto 3, missing pretty much all the testing in the first 2 races. Aside from that, a few other shout-outs. Obviously, Max Keeles, top rookie in P5. Good result for him on his first race. Another one is Adrian Cruces in P8. For a replacement rider, I feel like he's doing a really strong job, and especially because he's supposed to be in European Moto 2 this year, I think he's doing a really good job on the Moto 3 bike. The only other rookie in the points was Guido Pini in P11.
And I do want to come back to Cormac Buchanan because it is the first time a New Zealand rider, and obviously I live in New Zealand, so this is big props for our country, has been in the top 10 spot in a Grand Prix since Simon Crafar did so back in 1998. Even I wasn't watching MotoGP then because I was alive, but I was 5 years old. So I can't remember those days. So I don't know what it was like. But I'm sure that my family were watching and enjoying the racing, even though we lived in the UK at the time. Moto 2 was a gamble, and it paid off for some and it didn't pay off for others. The one notable point it didn't pay off for was Manu Gonzalez, because the conditions were mixed and it was a wet tyre choice or a dry tyre choice. And basically, Manu Gonzalez gambled and he lost. So he came across the line in P22 picking up no points. A bit of a disaster for him. Obviously, we all want him to do well. I think we've all got him put down for the championship this year. So hopefully next week goes a little bit better. As for the podium, we had Alonso Lopez, Tony Arbolino, and Jake Dixon, who won in absolute dominant fashion. Now, Poz, I know you have something on Gonzalez, so you first.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something that the commentators brought up on the Gonzalez tire gamble. They were saying that it was pretty much either way, if Gonzalez went with slick tires or wet tires, he was probably going to drop through the field because his pace on the wets in the weekend was not great. So I feel like that was probably the reason that pushed him into the gamble, just thinking, oh, I'm going to be last either way, I might as well go for like the sort of more outlandish option and see if it pays off. So I can't really bash him for taking that risk.
Race overall was mental. You could see the time difference in between the people with the wet tires and the people with the dry tires was mad. You can clearly see whose tires were paying off and whose wasn't. It wasn't really well, I can't say it wasn't really a crap show with crashes, which was really good. Unfortunate for Dennis Onfu, who was running a solid race in the points, and he was with his teammate Colin Vire, who you'll now have a bit of a rant for from me because he has finally finished in the top 10 in a Moto 2 race and has received points. I mean, to get points in a race like this is already really cool, but because it's Colin, it just makes me a bit happy. So yeah, I'm happy to leave it like that. Um, Vieri had a bit of a howler. I'll be honest, the man crashed, then he rejoined, and then he crashed again, and then he rejoined. I'm not sure he crashed a third time, and I hope he didn't. Like it just got from bad to worse for him. And like he still managed to finish ahead of people. He still managed to finish ahead of Morera, ahead of Gonzalez, ahead of Ages. How did he manage that? How did he manage to crash out twice? I don't know. It was shocking behavior. But I mean, Lopez and Arbolino podium is already great. I do miss these guys having good results, so I don't mind that I didn't really mix in with my predictions. And Jake Dixon win. Really happy over that. I love my little British man, so yeah, decent race overall, I'd say.
And as always, I'm going to cover some of the rookies because a fair few of them did a really solid job this weekend. Top rookie was Ivan Ortola in P6, which I believe's the best result for a rookie so far this year. Danny Holgado got another top 10 in P8. Obviously, we mentioned Colin Vaya was P10. He's not really a rookie, but Oscar Gutierrez got P12 on his fill-in ride for Sergio Garcia. And David Alonso was the last rookie in the points in P12, with Huertas just missing out in 16th.
Coming into the latter part of the season, maybe after race 7 or 8, we might start doing a little rookie update as well, because I'm super excited about the battle for Rookie of the Year in Moto2, because I feel like it's going to be quite competitive. At least I hope it is. I'm still gunning for Holgado for the win though. And I do like the fact that all three of us have different riders that we think are going to take that title. Looking at MotoGP and the sprint race, because those first 2 laps were sensational racing. I think I was watching them, not expecting that MotoGP was going to turn up at COTA. Typically, it's a classic Mark track. He dominates everything. And now he was on a factory Ducati. We knew he was going to do really well. But Pecco just absolutely launched off that line. And we saw some great battling from him. We also saw some great battling further down the field for P5. And that battle continued throughout the race as well. So, we had Fabio Quartararo unexpectedly up fighting in those positions, along with both VR46 riders. Eventually, the podium ended up the same podium that we had seen in the previous races, with Pecco Bagnaia MP3, Alex Marquez MP2, and Marc Marquez taking the win. But the race started sensationally, and it did have a lot of midfield battles to keep us entertained throughout. How did you guys find the sprint?
Considering the last 2 sprints, I didn't expect a lot from this one, but it didn't let me down. It proved me wrong more than anything else. Yeah, I had a good time watching it for sure. Um, of course, I was rooting for my man Marco Bezzecchi, and it didn't go the way I wanted it to because he just missed out on points in 10th. So a bit devastating for me, but there's really not a lot I can do about it. I just have to get up and move on to the next one. Bit devastating for Joan Mir because over the weekend that man was actually fighting for good positions. He was quick, he was speedy, he was solid, and then bang, it disappeared, all gone, and I hate that that was the case. Maverick Vinales, bad weekend, man, bad weekend. Honestly, if I'm going to be honest, I just think he's bad overall, but people aren't really happy with me when I say that, so I think I'll leave it at that. Yeah, in terms of who won the sprint, I think everyone expected it. Mark, Alex, Pecco, nothing to say about it, but they were a bit closer than I expected them to be, which was nice. And then the battle for fifth was entertaining. Good on Frankie for holding that now, to be honest. It was scary to look at. So overall, yeah, pretty fun race to watch.
Yeah, the part of the race that I thought was probably most important was the fact that Pecco Bagnaia is not scared to, even in the opening laps, try and string an aggressive move on Mark. He's not scared to sort of try and ruffle his feathers. So I think that could be an interesting sort of point going forward. Just seeing that Pecco's not scared to fight back. I think that could be really entertaining. But aside from that, Aigura was the only rookie in the points in P9. Aldeguer was pretty strong this weekend, but missed out on the sprint in 11th.
This brings us to Sunday. And we are going to do this in 2 separate parts because obviously, if you're listening to this, you probably will have seen the race. And I'm going to try and describe the start of MotoGP. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it as well. Basically, the title screen starts, and if you're watching closely, a fraction of a second before that title screen starts, Marc Marquez turns his head left and moves. And then the title screen starts. So, it's the usual MotoGP anthem. And then halfway through, or not even that, I think we're looking at Miguel Oliveira. The title screen cuts out. And it cuts out because Marc Marquez is running down pit lane. His bike's, on pole position in the grid. So you see him running down pit lane, and the commentators need a moment to catch up because they're like, what's going on? We're supposed to be chilling now. They're getting a breather before the race. But then they're like, the title screen has cut away because Marc Marquez is running down pit lane. Then we see Pecco Bagnaia running down pit lane. Also, Fermin Aldeguer, Joan Mir, and many other riders. Like, pretty much most of them. 10 riders did leave the grid at this point, and there's mass confusion. At one point, Maverick Vinales' bike gets stuck in between the grid and pit lane. So his bike leaves the grid but doesn't enter pit lane, which I will come back to in a moment. But we see a red flag and we see a delayed start because there is a rule which I just need to bring up because I have it saved, particularly for this moment, somewhere. So Mike Webb, the MotoGP race director, said, "We called for a delay and then a quick start procedure due to safety concerns, given the number of riders and bikes and pit staff in the grid and in the pit lane area. It was impossible to start the warm-up lap, and a new race start was the safest way to respond to the unprecedented circumstances at the start of the Grand Prix. We'll analyse the situation together and with the teams revisit the regulations." So there's this specific rule that relies to an aborted start where if more than 10 riders are going to be starting from pit lane, it has to be delayed. Now, Marc Marquez has owned up to delaying the start, and basically, we said a couple of weeks ago, at least Pozza and I agreed, that Marc Marquez didn't play too many mind games. He definitely did today, and we've been proven wrong because he was deliberate in his actions to run off that grid and delay the start because he thought that 10 riders would follow him. And he was absolutely correct because the moment he started running to the sidelines, Pecco Bagnaia followed him without, question. So, what did you guys think of this absolute madhouseness, I suppose? There's certain other words, but they usually contain swear words. And the fact that there's no penalty here, the fact that a race got delayed because a single rider ran off and the rest of them followed, it was just madness. And yeah, give me your thoughts because it was just messy.
I mean, I started laughing, I'll be honest. TNT Sports had a different view from what you guys did. It was from down below and you could see him turn his legs and everything to start running. And I'm going to be honest, I thought he just needed the bathroom. But I know some people are mad at him for doing it. I'm not. I'm really not. I think it was a clever mind game. He played it well. He he saw what he could have done and he did it. And I can't hate the man for it. It worked out in his favor. Well, no. The start of it worked out in his favor, and yeah, it was a clever move. I can't hate the man for doing it. So yeah, it just made me laugh a bit.
Yeah, fair play to him for knowing the rule and backing pretty much the rest of the grid to follow after him. But I would somewhat like to see that rule change just because, as Davide Brivio was saying when he got interviewed directly after that, the Trackhouse team and Aigura made that choice to go on slicks pretty much straight out of the pit lane, and they weren't able to capitalize on that correct decision because of what happened.
This weekend.
Which is kind of a shame to see.
Was sensational.
But
we
yeah,
could have
if it was in the rules, then
quite a
you
while,
can't really complain about it.
about Moto3 and
No,
Moto2.
the
rules were played to perfection here. Was just so and incredibly I do feel for Aigura and Davide Brivio. As always, because thank you for joining us, and we'll be here I can understand with a Qatar his Grand anger Prix preview because their team did everything right. And let's not forget, with a wet race, riders have the opportunity to go out on one bike, get to the grid on that bike, or go through pit lane and go on the other bike. So there is that opportunity to swap. Aigura didn't swap. and he went out initially on slicks, felt like it was comfortable, and then lined up on the grid. And yeah, it was just, I feel like it could have been a really good opportunity for Ayagura that definitely got missed. But start aside, the MotoGP race started off quite good as a Marc Marquez fan. It started off good. Unfortunately, it didn't stay good for Marc Marquez fans because 2 seconds up the road, in classic Pecco Bagnaia fashion, Marc bends it and he loses a foot peg, he damages his screen, and he loses his lead. He was 2 seconds up the lead, he was coasting. Absolute disaster. There was a bit of a crash fest after this with, I'm just going to name the riders off the top of my head, so I know I will forget some, and I apologise for that. We did have Brad Binder crash out. We had Johann Zarco and Fermin Aldeguer crash out really close to each other, and I'm a huge Aldeguer and LCR fan, so that broke my heart. We had Pedro Acosta crash out. It was a little bit scrappy in the last end of the race, but COTA usually is, given the track harshness and conditions. But we have to shout out Fabio Di Giannantonio because he is not fully fit. Let's not forget that, because he's battling a shoulder injury that's causing him extreme amounts of pain still, and he puts it on the podium in third place. Excellent ride by him. Alex Marquez keeps up his P2 streak and also takes the World Championship lead, which is sensational to me. In P1, Pecco Bagnaia, who has made the most of today. If we learned anything last year, it is the fact that if staying out of trouble can win you the World Championship, you can win that World Championship. It was a sensational race full of surprises, really. What about you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, definitely mixed feelings. I mean, I think we all know that I'm a big fan of Marc Marquez.
You're washed.
So, pause sucks. We're no longer friends. I'm a big fan of Marc Marquez, and the race just didn't go his way at all. He obviously did his little stunt running off the grid straight away, and yeah, it was just a bit of a howler. And then he went through the race and crashed. He had a broken windscreen and a broken foot peg, if I'm not wrong, and people were calling for a penalty. And to that, I'd like to say, if the bike does not pose a direct threat to any other rider, which it didn't, he cannot be penalised. That is how the rules work. Please stop trying to call for a penalty if you don't understand how they work. Thank you. Yeah, the race otherwise mental crash fest. Fermin Aldeguer was running in good points. I was really excited, and about a lap before, I had said, "Come on, Aldi, prove him wrong," and he crashed the lap right after that. John Muir also was having a good race in terms of pace, and then just crashed out of nowhere. It sucked. It sucked so bad. And then Pedro Acosta, who I really wanted to actually get a good result, didn't. He crashed again. In lighter news, Marco Bezzecchi finished sixth, so that is a solid 10 points for him and 10 points closer to my happiness. Yeah, shout out to Fabio for getting his podium. He deserved that, genuinely.
I don't particularly agree with the point that Marquez's lack of a right foot peg didn't really pose some form of risk. I know nothing happened, but even after he picked the bike back up, he still had a few number of riders that had come past him, and I feel like you can't really control. I haven't personally ridden a MotoGP bike myself, so I'll hold my hands up there, but I don't think it's would be particularly easy to handle it in like a fully safe manner when you're missing a right foot peg. I'm sure Kate, having ridden motorcycles, would be able to talk on that point further, but I still feel like either he should have pulled himself in knowing that he wasn't going to go anywhere, or the steward should have taken action, but that's just my personal opinions.
Yeah, I'm with Poz on this one. I think it should have been a black and orange flag. As someone who rides regularly, I lean on the foot pegs and I lean on them for comfort. But MotoGP riders don't lean on the foot pegs for comfort. They use them to balance their weight. And it was risky. It was unnecessary, in my opinion. His bike was pretty damaged. There was no sign of points. He should have known as soon as that next lap completed that the race was done. And given the fact that what we've seen Mark do in MotoGP gets repeated all the way down to Moto2, Moto3, and, the road to MotoGP, I just think it was a pretty... It was risk where risk didn't need to be taken. He was out of that race. He was going to be out of that race for a while. He was 3 seconds down on the slowest rider on the grid, who's a rookie on a Honda. So, that's like worst case scenario. I just think it was unnecessary risk. So, sorry, Kelly, gonna have to disagree.
I'd just like to shout out a few riders up and down the field for some strong results. Obviously, Luca Marini in P8, his best result on a Honda so far, showing signs that the Honda is getting better. They're also second in the Constructors, so good result for him. Igor was behind in P9, top rookie, as he has been in most of the races thus far. Augusto Fernandez finished 13th, replacing Miguel Oliveira, so good points on him for his return. And Lorenzo Savadori was the last points finisher in P15, so it's nice that he's finally gotten a point.
There was so much to talk about this weekend. It was sensational. We could have yapped for quite a while, especially about Moto3 and Moto2, but MotoGP was just so incredibly surprising this weekend. As always, thank you for joining us, and we'll be here next week with a Qatar Grand Prix preview.